Great. Okay, so thank you, Vatan and Astra and Javier. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and give this presentation today. I really value the opportunity, and I'm excited to learn more about what's happening in Estonia, what the Internet Native Organization is working on, and what you all in the audience are working on. So I'm excited to learn that, and I will start by sharing a piece of research that was recently published by the World Economic Forum, which I think will hopefully do a good job of teeing up the rest of the day. So I think I need screen sharing permission just so that I can launch this presentation that I want to run through. Great. It still says host disabled participant screen sharing. Oh, okay, got it. All right. Good. So I'm just going to jump in. Okay, perfect. All right. So I connected with Vatan, a few weeks ago, and he gave me some excellent background on, the organization today and the goals of DAO Day. And I think it is really an admirable, piece of work that the INO and that all of you assembled today, come together to work on to bring greater awareness to what's happening in the DAO space, not only the opportunities presented by this new forum, but also some of the challenges and some of the necessary mitigations to realize really realize the benefits that it can bring to economies, societies, and to the world more broadly. So to frame the current state of DAOs, which is what Vatan and the organizers asked me to come and do, I thought that it would be a good opportunity to actually share a toolkit that the forum released about a month ago at this point. And this is called the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, or DAO toolkit. So I will be walking through that, and then, hopefully also bringing, some context from what's happened since publication at the end of the presentation. So before I jump into the summary of this report and what we were doing, I do want to just speak briefly to the DAO project series, because I think that the impetus behind the project series is actually somewhat similar to the impetus, it sounds like, behind the Internet Native Organization and behind DAO Day, and that's really to investigate what value DAOs can bring across a whole variety of use cases. I put a figure up on the top right-hand corner of your screen, which is of course the huge growth in market size that Astra was alluding to. That is that in 2021 alone, the value of DAO treasuries skyrocketed by a factor of 40, reaching 16 billion, the equivalent of 16 billion US dollars. What is interesting from the World Economic Forum's perspective is not just the massive growth that we've seen in the DAO space, but also the variety of use cases that DAOs are being applied to. So I will present a taxonomy of different DAO use cases in a couple of slides, but just to comment on it briefly now, we see DAOs working in everything from financial DAOs, protocols developed for investment and the allocation of capital, which are perhaps some of the better known DAOs, to engagement in philanthropy and the social impact space. So we really do see not just a tremendous growth in the amount of capital being managed by these organizations, but also in the applications that innovators are bringing DAOs to. So because of all of that diversity and growth, the World Economic Forum thought it was time to do a real study of DAOs to try and understand their benefits as well as some of their drawbacks. So we launched a 3-part project series in partnership with an excellent research group out of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania called the Blockchain Digital Asset Project, which is led by Professor Kevin Werbach. And we divided our work into 3 deliverables. So you can find our DAOs Beyond the Hype white paper, which is our kind of DAOs 101. So that is for truly, if you are just getting into the space for the first time, if you're not crypto native, if you've never engaged with the DAO, or are not familiar with the topic at all, that DAOs Beyond the Hype white paper, which I can circulate in the chat, is a good starting point. Today, I'm going to be speaking to the DAO Toolkit, which was really our attempt to dig a step, go a step further and really analyze DAO operations, governance, tooling, law, and policy. And coming up next, we're actually currently working on an Impact DAOs report, which is going to try and tell the story of, in my view, some of the most exciting applications for DAOs, how DAOs are being applied to really serve some pro-social uses. Again, what some of the opportunities and challenges are there. So the three goals of this project series, the first is really research. So, putting out that research and guidance. And the second is putting some of that research into practice. So actually doing some advisory work. At the forum, we work across our public sector and private sector community members and partners to advocate, for, raising awareness about these new organizations, some of the challenges they raise. And then to develop a network. So everything I'm presenting today and everything we've done in the DAO project series, we're very lucky to be supported by an excellent, I think, world-class group of DAO experts that really span the globe. We have contributors, just over 100 contributors who are leading DAO practitioners, legal experts, academics, and policymakers that have contributed to this research and that continue to spread the word about the work that we are doing. So the DAO Toolkit, this is really what I'm going to be spending, our time together presenting today. And the toolkit, we really had two core audiences in mind here. So, the first is really developers. So for builders in the DAO space, we wanted to provide a summary analysis and recommendations of three areas that we feel are critically impactful for DAOs. The first is operations. So Batan, I loved your example about signing the invoice. How do you do these simple business processes that may be simple for traditional organizations, but that can be quite complex for DAOs. And some of that stems from a lack of clarity around law and policy, but some of that also, I think is by design. The decentralized community-based nature of DAOs, can spread those responsibilities and create some interesting operational challenge, but also some great opportunities there. Governance, so voting processes and how DAOs are governed, and some exciting strategies that have been developed there in recent years, and legal strategy. So how can DAOs think productively about the law and getting some form of recognition legally, especially in this time of a formative and quickly evolving period for Web3 law and policy more generally. Our second core audience was really policymakers. So as it sounds like the Internet Native Organization has identified as well, a really core barrier to scale for DAOs, we believe at the forum, is getting clarity on law and policy, policymakers building out the right types of laws and also enforcement mechanisms so that they can bring DAOs into regulated existence, and so DAOs can benefit from some of the some of the goods that come from doing that. So for policymakers, we wanted to provide that overview of the DAO landscape, which is also something we've done in our Beyond the Hype white paper, analysis of the policy questions DAOs raise, and also provide some recommended strategies that policymakers can take when they're thinking through how to build legal frameworks and frameworks for recognition around DAOs. Those section overviews that you see on your screen, I will share this presentation with you all after, but I'm going to walk through section by section what we've covered in the report just now. So first off, table stakes. What are DAOs? So categorizing DAOs was a very interesting challenge that we ran into, and I see that as a great benefit of working on this space, is that it seems as if every day, every week, every month, we are seeing new DAOs develop to serve new purposes. In our first paper, so in the Beyond the Hype paper, we released this DAO taxonomy, which you'll see at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, in which we separated DAOs into 9 different types to try and categorize, what is happening in the DAO space. And I think if you just take a quick glance at that, or if you've been active in the DAO space, how difficult it is to put a single definition, over all of these different organizations. So we settled on something we felt was sufficiently broad. We landed on, defining DAOs as entities that use blockchains, digital assets, and related tech to do three things. First, to direct resources. Second, to organize activities. And third, to make decisions in a decentralized fashion. So directing resources, again, is probably it's the simplest, arguably, but, in some ways could be the most powerful use case for DAOs. And so I'm thinking here of, investment DAOs, like Metacartel, for instance, or City DAO, that were really stood up, to make investments and allocate capital to different activities. Secondly, to organize activities. So, we've seen a number of different DAOs pop up where they are, bringing together a community around a specific goal or to pursue a specific communal objective together. And they may not be strictly organizing around the allocation of capital. They may be organizing technical development activities. They could be organizing. We haven't yet seen examples of this, but they could be organizing, a flash mob, people to come together at a specific place or time, to take a certain action. And third, they could be making decisions in a decentralized fashion. I think this is obviously the most generalizable and perhaps, the most powerful application of a DAO, which is that we really see DAOs as, trying to address some of the major challenges that we've not just seen corporate forms, address, in over decades and centuries, but also that we've seen, traditional forms of governance and government, trying to address. How do you make decisions as a collective in a way that balances fairness and efficiency? These are some of the considerations that DAOs have to wrestle with. So, a quick note on categorizing the DAO space, because I think it is useful, especially as for folks who are newer to it, to try and understand, well, how do I look at a DAO and classify it? So, the first question that we ask ourselves in the DAO project series for categorization is, what is the purpose of the DAO? Is it generative? Does it intend to generate a specific outcome? Is it associative? So is it principally about creating a community and a network around a DAO, or is it ad hoc? Is it a one-time, one-off purpose, a kind of special purpose acquisition DAO set up with a given purpose and then bound to that and then dissolves afterwards? So if you look at the table on the bottom right, that question of objective is what allows us to categorize the DAO along those different columns. And then thinking on the other axis, the other point that we consider is, how does the DAO plan to then achieve that objective? So what are its means? Does it facilitate activities? So that could be something like, facilitating software development. Does it allocate resources, or does it oversee actions? And you will see, one thing that we uncovered in our research is, as we dug deeper into specific cases of DAOs, we see them often moving across these categories. And so, that's one of the other exciting features of a DAO, is that it can truly be a flexible organizational form to achieve ends that may change over time. We, in our summary of the space, also uncovered that DAOs have the potential to realize tremendous gains in efficiency. While this is not often one of the benefits that is spoken to about DAOs, we do find that, through the use of things like multi-sig wallets, DAOs can really, realize gains over traditional organizations when it comes to certain applications. Adaptability, so that's that point I was just speaking to. So there is an ability for DAOs to really transcend these categorizational boundaries and grow and change over time as their objective dictates. And equity. So, this is a really interesting potential benefit of a DAO, is that, with a DAO and with governance tokens and with, voting more evenly spread across really a community, DAOs have the potential to realize a more harmonized, version of equity over traditional corporate organizations that may only make decisions in a top-down fashion, only valuing certain types of stakeholders like shareholders, for instance. Whereas in a DAO, you have the potential based on how it's designed and the community that participates to really bring in more stakeholders into the decision making and accountability process. However, DAOs also confront a variety of different challenges. So I've listed some here on the screen: coordination challenges, a lack of tooling, governance issues, and fragmented, uncertain law and regulation. And those are some of the issues that I will speak to later in the presentation. So next up, we've covered DAO operations. So I put another figure on the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and I think it does a good job contextualizing why it might be so difficult to manage a DAO, and that is that interest in DAOs swelled so rapidly. So in 2021 alone, again, we saw DAO participants increase in number by a factor of 130 times. And so we really see large communities that are flooding into the DAO space, that are doing work across all those different areas that I gave the overview of. And managing that operationally can be quite difficult. And so doing, in many cases, functions that are bread and butter for traditional organizational forums, things like recruiting, onboarding, managing employees, or in this case, really more contributors in the DAO space, that remains really difficult for DAOs. And again, some of that stems from a lack of clarity around law and policy, but some of that is just due to the decentralized nature of a DAO. Whereas in a traditional organization, you might have a human resources department that's in charge of onboarding activities. In a DAO could build that function out, but then what if those contributors cycle out? How is that institutional knowledge and those processes, how do they get maintained? And so thinking through DAO native ways of approaching DAO operations questions is really important. And we've already seen some great examples of DAOs doing just that. So to address those challenges, we've seen DAOs use certain strategies. I believe, Javier, you were speaking earlier about sub-DAOs and delegation, and how INO may want to leverage that strategy. And that is one that we've seen a number of DAOs take on, I think, quite successfully. The sub-DAO is basically building a smaller working group or a purpose-specific sub-body to take on, a given task. And that could be, managing a treasury. It could be overseeing a voting process. There's any number of different ways that a sub-DAO could operate. Through that smaller working group model, we've seen some DAOs reap some real benefits. We've also seen some benefit come from progressive decentralization. So this is quite common in the DAO space, where you will see a solid core group of contributors really develop the basis of a DAO. They develop the governance framework. They set the early objective. They have a strategy for getting more contributors involved. And then once there are a sufficient number of contributors, that small group can transition really management and ownership responsibilities over to the collective. So progressively decentralize the organization, which can also solve some of those upfront operational challenges DAOs face. The DAO operations, they also benefit from a variety of DAO tools. And so, Vatan, I know you mentioned the VC investment in the DAO tooling space, and the business to DAO space is an area that we spent a number of days and weeks digging into and learning about. There's a number of different exciting tools out there for helping to manage communities, accounting, voting processes, a number of different tools to ease the burden operationally on DAOs. At the same time, there are definitely gaps in the DAO tooling ecosystem, and so there's a variety of vendors and providers that are working to fill those. We also in this paper, and I won't go into it now, got into a typical flow of how do people engage with a DAO. So we walk through finding a DAO, going through onboarding, managing, and then being compensated. So if that's of interest, I would suggest checking out that DAO operations section in the toolkit. So next up, we touched on DAO governance, and we really see DAO governance as being the potentially the most interesting part of DAOs, also potentially the most challenging part of DAOs. You can imagine it is so difficult to manage democratic forms of governance in a traditional nation state setting. It's in many ways we see many of those challenges reproduced in the DAO space, and so doing that governance function can be quite challenging. But luckily, there are tools that have been developed here as well. So there are governance frameworks that DAOs can employ, and so these frameworks will codify the DAO's purpose, roles and responsibilities, incentives, and it will code that into smart contracts to enable the DAO to better function. And many of those frameworks are available off the shelf, so DAOs can go and they can leverage a DAO framework that's been developed before. They can adapt it to their purpose, and we are generally seeing a growth in the types of DAO frameworks that are out there. They're becoming more modular, so more adaptable, more extensible to different use cases, as well as becoming more interoperable. But one of the most interesting parts of DAO governance is around voting. So, these DAO voting processes, we see them as trying to balance efficiency and fairness in the process of trying to mitigate some of those very old challenges to, community organizing. So, you have issues like rational apathy, where in a DAO like Uniswap, for instance, you have so many different contributors who have a say and a vote, and perhaps because of the great number of contributors, that the large size of that denominator, they don't feel like their vote means much, and so we see this challenge of rational apathy in traditional democracy. We also see it in DAOs. So the question is, how do you overcome that? And there are some exciting strategies I'll speak to in a moment. One of the other challenges we've seen in DAOs is these plutocratic practices, and so really rule by or effective rule by contributors that control a large portion of the DAO's resources. So in a one token, one vote voting setup for a DAO, if you have the resources to invest in purchasing those tokens, you can amass a greater number of votes, and you can have a real centralizing effect in terms of where power and decision-making power in particular sits within a DAO. So those are some of the challenges we uncovered in DAO governance. But at the same time, we found some really exciting, mitigation strategies. Some of that comes down to the voting process leverage. So there's token-based quorum voting, conviction voting. These are some of the voting practices we cover in the paper, and we offer overviews of. To speak to one for a moment, we've seen certain DAOs like Gitcoin take a steward-based approach to voting, and so through nomination, certain individuals that are very committed to the DAO, that have a great institutional knowledge of what the DAO is doing, individuals and contributors can delegate effectively their votes to these stewards, and those stewards can take on some of those responsibilities. And so in that way, DAOs like Gitcoin and others are developing some interesting mitigation strategies for these challenges of rational apathy and others. We dig in the paper to a variety of different operational, technical, and legal strategies that DAOs can employ for governance as well. So if you want to double click on any of that, I would again suggest looking at that section. So legal structures, and this is the last area that I'll cover before going into recommendations and then wrapping up. We've seen DAOs leverage a whole variety of different legal structures to address legal and regulatory questions facing DAOs. So, as Batan was alluding to, corporations, other traditional organizational forms benefit from things like limited liability, recognition before the law, tax planning opportunities that stem from understanding how they pay taxes and what types of taxes they have to pay. Those are all benefits that accrue to traditional legal organizations that in many jurisdictions around the world do not yet accrue to DAOs. And so in the absence of that, clarity. We've seen DAOs pioneer, and also adopt a variety of different approaches to answering these legal questions. And so, some DAOs we've seen adopt a formal entity structure or wrapper to define their legal treatment. Some of these include the UNA, the Guaranteed Purpose Trust. We've also seen the development of bespoke legislative frameworks that can offer DAOs an alternative path to recognition. At the same time, while these legal structures can enable DAOs to achieve recognition and benefit from some of those goods that can accrue to traditional forms, we also see that leveraging these legal structures has costs. It creates financial obligations. It can create other requirements for DAOs, and again, it can be a point potentially of centralization. Legal structures leveraged by DAOs, these are not necessarily questions that are specific and unique to the DAO space, but they really raise questions that are more broadly under consideration for all of Web3. So, the question of securities law, taxation, anti-money laundering, know your customer, and due diligence requirements that DAOs, may or may not have to answer. These are really questions that, as everyone, I'm sure in the room is aware, are still under consideration and in many jurisdictions still require clear answers. And so while I view those questions as being upstream of many of these DAO-specific legal questions, they are no doubt highly impactful. And so part of the aim of this paper is to help educate lawmakers in these forums and in these major questions so that we can begin to develop some of that policy and regulatory clarity. So, choosing the appropriate legal response for any DAO is going to require a clear consideration, not just of the options available, but also, of the DAO's objective and, a consultation with experienced counsel working in this area. So, there are a number of different interesting questions to dig into here on legal structures. And so we have this table on legal structures, the bottom right hand of your screen, which is lifted from the paper. And that really breaks down some of the benefits and drawbacks of different legal strategies that DAOs can take. So I will close out by talking about recommendations. And so we didn't want to just produce, analysis and summary of what's happening in the space. We wanted also to engage, and try and help solve some of the challenges that we've identified. At the same time, doing that is difficult in the DAO space because, as I mentioned at the top, DAOs it's such a diverse set of actors and organizations in the space, and really addressing its needs are going to depend on considering the DAO's purpose, its community, its composition. And yet, we have seen the development of some great strategies around operations, governance.
Sorry, Aiden, we are running out of time. If you can hear us.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. We are running out of time right now. So, because the next speaker is in the waiting list, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
To wrap it up,
yes.
you can take 1 minute to wrap it up, yeah?
Sure.
Okay.
This slide, I'll just quickly say on operations, DAOs can really benefit from, in some cases, these division of labor, working group models, governance. There's a variety of different voting practices that DAOs can trial, which we cover in the paper. And then law and policy, we also walk through a structured step-by-step approach that DAOs can take to addressing some of those challenges. So I will close there. There is my email. I would love to hear any feedback, questions from you all. So please, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Raj.